I read a study that really kind of stopped me in my tracks, found that only 1 in 3 leaders finished well. That means statistically, it is easier not to finish well. How many times over the last decade have we seen what happens when a leader loses his or her way? 24% of individuals that walk away from faith, they do so because they saw someone lose their way and they became disillusioned. There is a lot at stake when it comes to this issue of living well. I ended up writing my eulogy. I put it on my calendar, and every year on my birthday, I read it, and it's an invitation for realignment. Where do I need to recalibrate? Where do I need to change direction? That was a profound experience to be reminded what matters most.
Welcome to the Courageous Men Podcast, where we help Christian men follow God faithfully, love their families well, and build a legacy that lasts. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
Welcome to the Courageous Men Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Peter Greer. He's the president and CEO of Hope International and a trusted voice on faith-driven leadership. Peter has spent decades leading a global organization that brings together business excellence, generosity, and discipleship, and he's done it with consistency and conviction. What stands out to me about Peter is not just what he's built, but how he's stayed aligned to his calling over the long haul. Today, we're talking about what it really looks like to lead without losing your way in our leadership, our faith, and in our families. Peter, it's an honor to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I know you've led Hope International for many years through growth, complexity, global impact. And just so the listeners know, I got to see this firsthand, took my boys on a Hope trip to the DR in February of this year. I couldn't recommend it enough. Just that experience with my boys, that was so good. We still talk about it. There's still so many learning lessons from that as well. And just also getting to see the work you all are doing there is just fantastic, and how you all are caring for these people, not just individually and in their day-to-day lives, all these things that you all are helping equip them to have their own businesses and livelihoods, but eternally as well, right? And that's I love that, right? That you all are majoring on the majors there, right? You're helping them in their day-to-day, but ultimately helping them eternally also. But how has this role, Peter, helped shape your understanding of what it means to lead without losing the way?
Yeah, and I love that you had the opportunity to go and see the Ministry of Hope International in the Dominican Republic, and that's a sincere invitation. We love showing this work to others and love having the opportunity to go on vision trips and that experience as a family. I just love the opportunity that you had. And Hope International, I do work with an organization, and in many ways, Whitney, I kind of got my dream job when I was fairly young. And I remember writing a paper when I was a sophomore in college that someday I would want to work with an organization doing Christ-centered economic development around the world. And then after living internationally at age 29, I ended up getting my dream job, moving to Lancaster County, joining Hope International, and I've been there ever since. And you asked the question about this idea of leading and losing your way. And in many ways, this has kind of been part of the journey that I think for a lot of us, as we're on the leadership journey, one of the most challenging things perhaps that we experience is when we see individuals that we learned from, looked up to, mentors, make decisions that are like, what just happened? How did you make that decision? And that caused us to start really the book that we wrote, How Leaders Lose Their Way, was really trying to understand, not in any sort of a judgment, but really out of a desperation, how does this happen and how can we make sure it doesn't happen to us? So with that as the background, that's the context. I really think the answer to your question is initially to not lose your way. It starts with knowing what is that ultimate destination. What is a life well lived? What does it look like for you and me at the end of our time to say that was a life well lived? And I think a lot of us maybe spend so much time in the whirlwind, so much time in the day-to-day activities today that we don't look up to the horizon and say, what ultimately matters? What matters most? And I think that's really the starting point. If we want to make sure we don't lose our way, I think we have to understand what is that point on the horizon? What is a life well lived? And then to do the work of making sure we're aligning the way that we live today with that ultimate destination. So it was a fantastic journey. I've been shaped by my time at Hope, but really this research project really opened my eyes to just how important it is to understand what is success really? What is a life well lived really? And then how do we make sure we are living in alignment with that?
I love that. If you don't have a plan for what's the saying? You know, like you don't plan for where you're going. I mean, you're going to get there, right?
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
It's said better, but ultimately, when you hear the phrase say leading without losing the way, what does the way actually mean to you, maybe personally? And then, when did you define that for yourself? But, what does that mean to you? And when did you learn to define that?
Yeah, well, I read a study that really kind of stopped me in my tracks, and it was a study that was done looking in Scripture and looking at how many finish well. And the conclusion was called the Barnabas study. It found that only 1 in 3 leaders finished well. And then the author went on to look at the percentages today and said it probably is only 1 out of 3 that finish well today. And finish well was defined in that study as not significantly abusing power, platform, or privilege, like not significantly deviating and using what we've been given for our own ends. And I thought that was a pretty good definition. And so then it was if 1 out of 3 finish well, that means statistically it is easier not to finish well than it is to finish well. And that got my attention. And then again, how many times over the last decade have we seen what happens when a leader loses his or her way? How many times have we seen the impact, not just on the individual, not just on the family, not just on the organization, but did you know that 24% of individuals that walk away from faith, they do so because they saw someone lose their way and they became disillusioned. And so there is a lot at stake when it comes to this issue of living well. But starting with that definition of I don't want to be someone who significantly abuses the power, platform, or privilege that I've been given. And so how does it happen? And how do we make sure we chart a different course?
Yeah. Wow. I appreciate the definition. I think it's so helpful to think through. One of many reasons, even when I started this podcast, and to just help men, right? In this exact way that you're talking about, being on stage with many people, I'll say, where, on the outside, even on social, right, everything just looks perfect. They got it together. Their business is exploding. But just spending a little time with them, it's like, wait a minute, like, I don't want what you've got. Like I'm with them enough to like, wait a minute, like there's problems, right? There's problems at what I would say is the most foundational, the most important parts of their life, whether it's in their marriage or relationship with their children. And I don't want the most amazing business at the expense of what matters most, right? Or my faith and my time with the Lord. And so I just appreciate that definition and speak to like when did you start to define that for yourself? And when did you like think through that as a business leader or yourself? And how did you come about that? How did you, and when was that?
Yeah, no, I can tell you with absolute specificity when that was. I was with my grandfather in Ephrata Community Hospital the night when he went from this life into being with Jesus. In that room, I thought we were just stopping by. I had no idea that there were literally only minutes left. But watching the reaction of my grandmother, she threw herself on him and just, I mean, it was sacred. It was beautiful. And it was like the two of them had loved and served so well together. And it was a level of grief that was rooted in love, of doing life together for 60 whatever years that they had been together. And then watching the reaction of the family around and the words that were spoken, and then watching the memorial service and the words, stories I had never heard before of the way that he lived with such great faithfulness and little fanfare. He loved people well, and the impact was extensive. And I remember reading an article by David Brooks where he talked about the difference between resume virtues and eulogy virtues. And he said, most of us, there's a difference between what we put on a resume and what we talk about in a eulogy. He said, those two things are not the same. And he said, most often we spend all of our time, energy, focus on the resume. Look at this title. Look at what this accomplishment is. Look at this award. And he said, you read a eulogy and that stuff is glaringly absent. That is not what matters most. And so after reading that and after thinking back of the time with my grandfather, I ended up writing my eulogy. And this might sound odd, Whitney, but I put it on my calendar, and every year on my birthday, I read it. And it's an invitation for realignment. It's an invitation to say, if this is indeed true, if this is indeed what I say I want my life to be about, where do I need to recalibrate? Where do I need to change direction? Where do I need to shift some decisions that I'm making? And that was a profound experience to be reminded what matters most. And that was the moment that I would say I had clarity on the hoped for destination. And then it gives me a framework every year at a minimum to say, where do I need to make course corrections based on what I have written down, what I say matters most?
Wow. I love that the image and the impact your grandparents had on you as well. I have a similar story with my grandparents, and so that's so neat. Just the influence that they've had on you, and it makes me think about, you writing that down and thinking through that, but the impact that's going to have on your grandchildren, great grandchildren, right? What do you see, Peter, as say maybe some of those pressures, when you're in that seat that say most test leaders and their disalignment with that direction?
Oh, there are so many ways to lose your way, right? And again, part of the research on this was to look from leaders that lost their way. And I am so grateful. We heard story after story of leaders who, by their own admission, say, I totally lost my way.
Mm,
And many of them, again, there's some common themes that we heard again and again. But one of them was this idea of believing that it would never happen to them, believing that other people I might read about who lost their way, but it would never happen to me. That was a common theme of leaders that lost their way, the belief that it would never happen to them. And that has changed the way that I read the next headline. When whatever comes out this week of another leader who made a mess of things, I think there's two responses. One is, I can't believe they did that. I actually don't think that's a very helpful response. I think a better question is, where in my life might I be on a similar path? Where might I go? And I love the idea of Robert Robinson wrote in a hymn, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. And he wrote these words. He said, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. And what he's saying is, it's easy to lose our way. I know myself well enough to know it's easy to lose our way. And so that is one common theme. And maybe if we're having this conversation, I would say every single one of us, no matter where we are in life, it is easy to lose our way. It is the predominant path to lose our way. And it takes work to make sure that we are going on a different path, to recalibrate, refocus, and then live in alignment. That is actually one of the themes that we heard again and again is, if you say this would never happen to me, oh, be aware, be careful. There are people that could be elevated as case studies who went before you who also said, not me. That would never be my story.
yeah, Lord help us,
Yep.
right? Lord, I
Yep.
need your help every
That's right.
day,
Yeah.
every day. Peter, are there guardrails that have helped you, say, remain consistent spiritually, relationally, or, through, say, long seasons of leadership?
Yeah. And I would say this was the real work of the book. This was the real work.
Mm,
Is my guess is you and I, in about 15 minutes, could come up with an extensive list of ways that people lose their way, right? We know these are the areas, these are the things. The piece that I find more difficult is to say, how can we bring together what we know and what we do? And again, King Solomon is such a fascinating case study because you can literally read the words in the book of Proverbs, and he knew what to do. And yet you look at his life and he didn't do it. And I don't think that is just for a king from several thousand years ago. I think that's a modern issue of, where in my life do I know but not do? And how do we bring those two together? And so, really, at the end of every single chapter, to answer your question, it's getting real concrete. It's getting specific. These are the practices that if we did these things, we would be able to recalibrate, to refocus, to come back on mission. And so some examples of that, I was very intentional about my goals for the year. I love making goals. I love achieving. That's just the way that I'm wired. But you know what I never was as thoughtful about is who are the relationships? And a year from right now, who are the people that I'm going to be closer to? And isolation is utterly lethal
Mm.
when it comes to leadership. Utterly lethal. And so, if indeed that is true, what are we doing? And does our calendar reflect it? Does our prioritization reflect the fact that we need to be in trusted relationships with others? So, I remember being in Rwanda, and a friend talked about how in rural Rwanda you need four friends, and that was very specific. And I remember, like, why four? And he said, well, that's how many people carry a stretcher. So you need to know if you get sick, you're going to have four people that are going to be willing to show up no matter what time it is. And I thought, that's good. So I say, who are your core four? Doesn't have to be a ton of people, but I think we all need four people that know us and love us without any sense of it's not about accomplishments. It's about just friendship and trust. And if we don't have that core four, I think we are in a more vulnerable place. And especially for men, Whitney, it is unlikely that men make new lifelong friends after the age of 36. Like it's rare. That is statistically it is rare. So who are the people that we're doing life with? And are we cultivating? Are we nurturing? Are we prioritizing those relationships with our core four? And I would say, if not, that should be a blinking red light that we might be in more or heightened danger of losing our way.
Ah, that is so good. And just calling out the danger of isolation, right? And that being a priority on our goal list. Who are
Yeah.
those people? Who are the four
Yep.
that we're going to be super strategic about? And I want you to speak to that. How have you done that? How are you doing that now? Maybe tell us, how are you picking those four, right? You can't, unfortunately, you can't be amazing friends with a dozen or more, 15 people, probably, right? Some people may be able to, but I find it very difficult, right? To be that strategic and really that kind of accountability and care, knowing somebody. How did you pick those people? Does it change? How do you nurture? Go ahead.
Great. We know this idea. We know the importance. How do we actually do it? How do we actually prioritize? And this is where, again, trying to answer that question, we created something called it's like a constellation framework of our relationships. And Whitney, I do this every time between Christmas and New Year's. I look at it and I literally have a map of relationships. And so the answer, does it change? Yeah, there's certain parts because I've got one section, which is the mentors in my life. Who am I learning from in a specific area? So not just like mentorship as some broad idea, but who am I learning from in what I've identified as the most important areas for me to learn and grow in this year? And then look at my prayer team. Who am I having as I know I can share anything with them and they will immediately be with me in prayer? And who are the people that I'm pouring into? And yes, on the relationship app, the constellation of mentoring, it's and who are my core four? Those people. And so, just personally, one of the things that I do is not just to reflect on that full range of relationships, but then I look at my calendar. And yeah, on my calendar, I have every Friday morning a standing meeting with my closest friends, and I make sure, and we're praying for each other, and there is nothing that is off limit in the conversation. And then I've got a group, we call ourselves the eulogists. We live to help each other for what we say matters most. And it's a group of nonprofit leaders, and we physically gather together the second week and in January every year. We've kind of blocked it out for life. And so just like making sure that we have clarity on the relationships and then calendarizing what we say matters most. And again, this might be overly structured for some, but I don't think you have to copy this structure. But I do say if there's not clarity on who, and if there is not the regularity of relationship, you are going to find yourself at a future point when you most need those relationships, and they're going to be distant, and there's not going to be context, and you're not going to know who to call. And I just have seen that again and again. And you talk about the themes that we heard from people who lost their way. They had no one who really knew them. They had no one that they could be honest with. They had no one that they didn't have to play or show or pretend that they had it all figured out. And I think that's the gift of trusted friendships when just me, no titles allowed, just just me, just in relationship. And that is the mark of what I would call a real and genuine gift of friendship.
Peter, there's so many things around that I would love to talk about. But one quick thing, your Friday mornings, is that one-on-one with somebody? Is that a group of guys, or is it like somebody different every Friday for the month and it starts back over? Give us a little bit of idea. I love structure, and I feel like if I don't structure it and kind of have it on the schedule, like it won't happen, right? And I won't be, intentional to make that happen. What does that look like a little bit?
Yeah, started with small group, and now it is just one-on-one, and it's been so life-giving. So that's one piece. And then again, this might sound odd, but then I have other calendar reminders of other times to connect with the people that I really say, like, this is the group, no secrets, no pretense. This is who we are, and we're walking together.
Speak to how you enable that person to hold you accountable. And I feel like that's often a problem, right? We don't really want to be held accountable. One, right? We don't want somebody asking us those hard questions. I mean, in one sense, but I want people to ask me because I want to be held accountable. I want to improve. I want to grow. I want to be challenged. How did you tell that person, hey, there's nothing, off the table here. Like, ask me anything, hold me accountable. How do you give them that authority to do that?
Yeah, it's so good. So I think every single one of us has a box inside of us, and it's the things that we know and no one else knows. And I think that for most of us, we keep putting more and more in that box. I could never share about or this, and we just, what do? We stuff, we stuff, we stuff. You know how dynamite is made? Keep compacting, keep pressing it down, and I guarantee those things don't go away and they inevitably come out in not a good way. I think the alternative is to diffuse that box, to take things out of that box. And that does not happen immediately. It's not normally appropriate to happen immediately. But I think that we do have this gift of walking with people and in real relationship, sharing honestly and openly. I have a mentor who talked about his box is finally empty. He said, I have no secrets. It's like, what? Tell me more. And literally, he's been walking with his friend, and he's like, I have no secrets. And something changes when you have no secrets. You are less vulnerable. Uh, it's amazing what happens when we can just be open, and that does not come easy for all of us. So, are we putting more things in the box? Or are we slowly taking them out? And I think that you use the word accountability, and I guess as we were doing the research on how leaders lose their way, I guess my understanding of accountability, I think it diminished because there were several individuals who lost their way that had accountability structures, but accountability structures are never going to do it. It's like an external audit.
Mm.
How often are external audits going to actually find the challenge in the organization? Like very, very, very rarely. It's much more likely that it's going to be caught in other ways. And I think in a similar way, I would say the onus of responsibility is on you, not others. And whenever we think about accountability, like, hey, you didn't hold me accountable,
Mm.
that's shifting the blame. I think far better is to say, who are you in a relationship with? And it's up to you to go first. It's up to you. And I guarantee if you're walking with someone long enough, they got stuff in their box too. But I think it really is not, it cannot be externally imposed. It requires courage, requires vulnerability, it requires willingness to go first. Say, hey, I'm struggling with something. Can we talk about it? I'd really appreciate your prayers because this is something that I know. This path does not go to the place that I want it to go. And can I just share some stuff that I've been wrestling through? And would you pray for me? Like, wow, that what did you just do? You reached in, you took a few things out of that box, and they lost some of their power because you are now not stuffing it down, but in relationship. So it's difficult, and yeah, I think we all still have things in our box, but the question is it getting bigger? Is it getting pushed down? Or are we in
Mm.
relationships where we can slowly, over time, take stuff out of that box in trusted relationship?
Love the dynamite analogy as well. I find too, the more vulnerable I am with a trusted friend, the more vulnerable they are, and even the deeper the relationship goes as well, right? So good.
Right.
I also want to dive into Peter on the, I don't want to lose our way at home, and I would love to talk about, or you to be able to elaborate on, the way you've right, you've led this organization, and obviously you're in a super important role there, and obviously that has all these tugs, all these pressures, all these things we've been talking about. But how do you ensure leadership success? It doesn't cost you your home, right? Your marriage, or as a father, or let's dive in there a little bit. But how have you ensured that success doesn't cost you your family?
I think it starts by something that you just said that I believed for too long is I'm in a super important role at work.
Mm,
I would probably rephrase that to say I am in a super important role at home.
yeah,
And of all the titles that I have had, or will have, the privilege of having the title of husband and the privilege of having the title dad, those are super important roles. And again, this comes back to the story about my grandfather. As great as it was with his career and as important as our work is, and it honors God, absolutely true. You know who's there in that room? It was his kids and it was his grandkids. And sometimes we can focus so much on the professional role and on the professional accomplishment and the professional relationships that we might undervalue the role and privilege that we have as having other titles. And so, what are the ways? I love the question. Like, let's get practical. So, a couple practical things. One, I wrote my eulogy and I wrote my resignation letter. And I have my resignation letter in my drawer. And it reminds me that there will be a day that I'm going to walk away from this job that I love, from this organization that I love, from these people that I have so privileged to serve alongside. And there are going to be things that Lord willing, are still going to be true at that moment. I'm still going to have the title husband. I'm still going to have the title of dad. And that is awesome to remember. So that's one practical way. And then I think the other piece is to actively create a culture of succession planning. There is something that is so healthy about thinking beyond ourselves to realize the temporary nature of every single role, that you and I are temporary in a role. We are interim and then fill in the blank. We are interim in our role, and it just allows us to think about a broader picture, a longer timeline, building a healthier organization that is free from the over reliance on one or two individuals. And it starts to have this beautiful way of empowering a team. And so just one thing that we've done at Hope, I have a travel cap and everyone else does too. No one is away from home more than 75 nights. That is a limit that is not limiting. That is a limit that is freeing. It allows me to be present at home more than I am away, and that is a gift. And it also means that if we get an invitation to share about Hope International, but I'm out of nights, or I'm, just you can't say yes to everything, it means someone else at Hope is having the opportunity to share the message, and it builds a healthier organization. And so some of the real practical pieces of thinking beyond ourselves and creating an empowering culture where we all need to be engaged. It just has all of these positive outcomes, but I think the most positive outcome is what it does in our heart to slowly remember we are more than our job title. Our worth is not found in the work that we do alone, and reframe some of the relationships and reprioritizes them. It's been so helpful. And again, the irony is that has changed my home life, and it has strengthened the organizational impact as well.
Yeah, you mentioned in that room, your grandfather, with your grandfather, his bosses weren't there, right? His previous, coworkers, most likely weren't there, right? That is such a good thought. Just even getting a little more practical too, Peter. Maybe are there other boundaries, other things where, you have shown Laurel, hey, she's above the job, right? She's more important. How have you consistently shown up there as a husband to major on the marriage?
I'm still such a work in progress.
I know
I'm
you've got
still,
this mastered,
yeah, yeah, right. Don't believe anyone who says they have. I'm still learning, and I think it's different in every season.
of course.
I think there are a couple moments that I look back to as defining moments, and most of them, unfortunately, are when I chose the wrong path. And I was like, I will never do that again. One was when there was a trip that was coming up, and it was snowing, and Laurel was pregnant, and she was sick. And I bet you know where the story's going. At that moment, the right decision would have been to cancel the trip. And what did I do? When the alarm went off, she was sleeping. She's fine. friends, I'm sure, are gonna like, I'll send it. Oh, someone will care. It was such a terrible decision
Mm.
that sent such the wrong message in that moment, and I can't believe that I was so tangled up in my importance. I
Mm.
have to be there. And if we have not canceled something because a relationship, I would say maybe we have our loves misordered or misaligned. And I know that that was true. And I never, ever, ever want to do that again. So that's one where was not, I had misordered level of prioritization. And I think, as we were just talking about with the resignation letter, I have asked that if Laurel ever feels that she is not the priority in my life, uh, I will walk away from this job because it's not a competition. Um, and please hear me, like I love the work that I do. I do not want to walk away from this job, but if I am not willing to, if the cost is too high on the people that are closest to me, then I have lost my way. And that's something that I think about as well. So, yeah, but still, goodness, still a work in progress in knowing what this looks like.
I like the thought of, hey, have I canceled something? When have I canceled something? Because, that relationship is more important, or, just check myself there a little bit, right? And I'm guilty of all those things, but as well, so good. Man, is she that important that I've canceled this travel, when I needed to be at home more, or major on that relationship more than that work thing that was happening where I thought I was so important. What about are there guardrails maybe that you've given an assistant or other coworkers that help you to major on the majors like that? So like even the 75 nights, I thought that's great. It is freedom for your people, right? They know. And even I love the you said too that means that somebody else gets to go do that if I've hit my 75. Well, are there other guardrails that maybe you've given your assistant that the man listening could give his assistant, right, to help him to do the same?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting how many times secrecy came up. And I would just say, in general, the more open and transparent you are, the wiser, the wiser you will be. And so I think that's one just real simple practice is, your calendar and, your computer, whatever. The more openness you have, the wiser you will be. And so that's just one real simple practical piece. And then I think another one that is helpful is I think for a lot of leaders, they don't invite critique. And so I think that what happens with leaders, the more successful you are, Whitney, the less likely people are to tell you the truth. The more likely it is that you're going to have people that say, well, I would never want to challenge. And so I think another piece with those that you're closest to, when was the last time you invited that level of feedback? Hey, could you help me? This matters to me. I want to avoid the very appearance of anything that might be inappropriate or improper. Could you help me where in my life? Start with the assumption that there are areas. Start with the assumption that you do have blind spots. Start with the assumption that there are ways that you might need to get a little bit of redirection and invite it. And then when it is given, say only two words. Thank you. Like no justification, no additional context. Thank you. And I
But
think
but
that
but
level,
but
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, so I think that to me is maybe really helpful. The
mm,
more openness, the more transparency, and the more we show that we really do value. And again, King Solomon wrote, he said, wounds from a friend can be trusted. And so I think the question is, where are our wounds? Where has someone told us the truth? Might have been uncomfortable, but if we cannot remember the last time someone gave us that level of critique, there's only two options. One, you've done everything perfectly, or two, you do not have people in your life that care enough about you to inflict a few wounds that might be necessary to have that course correction. And again, King Solomon literally never in his life, he wrote these words down, but never in his life do we see anyone calling him on the issues as he was going further and further off track. So I think for all of us, it's a gift. Who are the friends that we have? And have we been open and receptive to those wounds from a friend that can be trusted?
Wow. Is that the Friday morning friendships like you're talking about? That would be that level to receive that kind of
Sure.
wounds?
Sure, but in essence, you know who knows you better than that? When was the last time you did that with your colleagues?
Mm.
When was the last time you did that with your kids? When was the last time you did that with your spouse? And I think that level of invitation and receptivity is absolutely essential. And I had one person, his name was Chuck Bentley, but he said this. He said, "I came to realize that my away game was better than my home game." I was like, wow, that hits a little close to home for me too. It's easy to fool individuals when you're with them for a few minutes, but what does it look like to invite? What does it look like to be open and receptive to those that we're closest to and say, help me see, what are my blind spots, or where have I not loved and cherished you, or what could I do to be a better dad in this season? Yeah, open communication and receptivity.
So good, Peter. Wow. Peter, if you could give the men listening just one challenge this week so they can lead without losing their way, what would that be?
I mean, I think it is a profoundly important exercise. We already talked about it. Start with that destination. If you've never done it, what does it look like? What is a life well lived for you? What matters most to you? And then that allows us to see and have the courage to say, Lord, search me. You know me.
Mm.
Show me and lead me in the ways that I'm getting off track. That is a profoundly important. And then go on the journey with others. Is there someone else that you could say, I just want to grow in relationship with? I don't want to just talk about sports and activities. Who are the people that I can start getting some things out of my box? And if you know that destination, and if you walk with a small band of brothers, oh, that just is going to change the likelihood and the possibility of you not being those two out of three that didn't finish well. So I would say that destination and then who we walk with are going to be absolutely mission critical.
Peter, that's incredible. This has been such an encouraging time with you. I know you have challenged the men listening in a massive way. You've challenged me in many ways, in many positive ways. I'm grateful. Thank you so much for your time today. How can the listeners learn more about you or get more in touch with you, even learn more about hope, but also your books as well?
Yeah, so we created a bunch of tools and they're available online for free if you want to go to howleaderslosetheirway.com. The constellation mentoring that we talked about, how to slow down the internal RPMs is there and identify areas of drift. And there's a self-assessment you can take if that's helpful. So all of that is available at howleaderslosetheirway.com. And then if you want to learn about any of the other, you can go there. And then Hope International is hopeinternational.org to learn more about the work that we do. So howleaderslosetheirway.com and hopeinternational.org.